New Year's Eve on BBC One.
So you're starting to turn no confirmed.
Mike Smith hosts a showbiz battle of the year, Neighbours versus EastEnders. While back home in Albert Square, it's not all celebration.
Isn't it enough you've wrecked our lives without rubbing our noses in it? But I won't have it, do you hear? I won't have it, and I don't want your rotten leaflets!
A question of sport and a special contest between the past and present team captains. Then a television premiere as a self-made millionaire goes back to school.
Shake it up, baby! Twist and shout!
Clive James is on next. I like Clive James.
Spend the last 90 minutes before 1992 remembering what really happened in 1991. Look forward to the story behind the story of the year behind us as we journey forward through a vision of the past.
3, 2, 1!
Welcome in the new year with BBC One.
I just need to carry out a couple of tests, Mr. Meldrew. If I take a jiffy.
Comedy with one foot in the grave in half an hour. And after that, at 10:20, our review of the year with Jonathan Dimbleby, from the Gulf War to the Maastricht Summit, plus a few lighter moments. Now on BBC One, the 9 o'clock news with Michael Buerk.
The former Soviet republics have agreed on a single command for nuclear weapons, but they couldn't agree on joint conventional forces, and they're at loggerheads over economic reforms. Here, 200 businesses are going bust every working day. Labour say if the Tories cut taxes before the election, they'll put them back up again. Good evening. The leaders of 11 former Soviet republics have agreed to a single command structure for the old Union's thousands of nuclear warheads. But they've failed to agree on joint conventional forces. Instead, each republic will be allowed to have its own army and will have the choice whether or not to place former Soviet troops under unified command. They also failed to resolve their economic differences, particularly over the pace of the transition to a market economy.
Boris Yeltsin set off for Minsk well aware that the Commonwealth he co-founded only 3 weeks ago was already in danger of coming unstuck. He said he was still optimistic, though, insisting that nothing and no one can threaten the community's future. But the truth is there has been a lack of harmony between member states. Some even suggested the Commonwealth could soon fall apart. Rivalry is increasingly bitter between Russia and Ukraine, whose leader Leonid Kravchuk arrived in Minsk today and immediately confirmed that he wants to take over most of the Black Sea naval fleet, to which Russia also lays claim. President Kravchuk also accused Mr. Yeltsin of violating the spirit of the Commonwealth by lifting price controls this week before other states are ready. So on both the key issues of defence and the economy, this new community remains divided, and it's having to work hard to paper over the cracks. Today, the 11 leaders needed to reassure both their own people and the outside world that their infant Commonwealth is viable, that it wasn't just a device for killing off the old Soviet Union and for forcing Mr. Gorbachev into retirement. But as the leaders went into their talks, there was still mutual suspicion. Kazakhstan, for example, said Russia must not be allowed to become the big brother of the Commonwealth. And progress today was said to have been slow and difficult. Patience is needed, though, according to the former Soviet foreign minister.
In 2 weeks, in a month, even in a year, you can't achieve a transition which is painless. It's just not realistic. Look how long it's taken the European community. Decades. And they still argue when they're deciding fundamental questions.
And there were plenty of arguments today as well, but the leaders of the Commonwealth confirmed there will be a unified central control over nuclear weapons here. Mr. Yeltsin said he'll meet leaders of the 3 other nuclear states in a few days' time to discuss the precise mechanism for consulting them in any crisis. On conventional forces, there was a compromise. Ukraine, Moldavia and Azerbaijan will be allowed to form their own national armies. The other 8 former republics will be in a combined defence force. More negotiations are needed, but the Commonwealth seems to have settled at least some of its differences. Ben Brown, BBC News, Moscow.
Rebel leaders in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia have warned of civil war there unless President Gamsakhodia steps down. Fierce street battles between rebel and government forces have spread throughout the capital, Tbilisi. Rebel troops say they're preparing to launch another attack on the parliamentary building, where President Gamsakhodia has been under siege for a week.
The violent struggle for power here is spreading through the streets of Tbilisi, with shooting in a number of areas which were quiet until now. This morning, the new headquarters of the opposition forces came under fire. Only 2 days after their former base in the Tbilisi hotel was burnt down, the historical institute to which they'd retreated came under attack. Heavy machine guns fired from the parliament straight up Rustaveli Avenue, Tbilisi's main street. President Gamsakhodia had held a council of war beneath the parliament where he's been holed up for a week and a half. With political and military support ebbing, he decided to demonstrate his ability to fight on. The opposition launched a counter-attack, though. Armoured personnel carriers and a multiple rocket launcher advanced towards the parliament. All afternoon, rocket, mortar and cannon fire resounded throughout the centre of the city. Snipers have taken over the upper floors of almost every tall building that is still standing. Random shooting sent civilians running for cover. The situation is still chaotic tonight, and it's not clear whether either side have gained any ground. Casualties are reported to be high. Carol Walker, BBC News, Tbilisi.
Moscow correspondent Ben Brown joins me now. Ben, as you were reporting, they appeared to have agreed how to control nuclear weapons. How reassured should we be?
Well, I think quite reassured. There has been quite a lot of agreement in Minsk today, more perhaps than some of us were expecting. And I think that violence that you've seen in Georgia is an indication of why it's so important that the former Soviet Union, the new Commonwealth, does get complete agreement on nuclear weapons in particular. There is one area of doubt still. Although the former republics say that they do agree with unified control over strategic forces, they're not entirely clear how they define those strategic forces. They're clear that that includes nuclear weapons, but not clear whether it includes the former Soviet fleet and the former Soviet Air Force, which some of the republics lay claim to.
The former, it's all formers, isn't it? The former Foreign Minister, Edvard Shevardnadze, is talking about paramilitaries perhaps getting hold of nuclear weapons. What do you make of that?
Well, some people here say that Mr. Shevardnadze has been making rather too many prophecies of doom recently, although he did, of course, correctly predict the August coup. But he's right in the sense that tactical nuclear weapons are much more widely spread around the Commonwealth than the long-range strategic nuclear weapons. The tactical weapons are perhaps easier to use or to misuse. And again, if you look at the example of Georgia or perhaps Nagorno-Karabakh, it is a real fear that some of these quite well-armed forces could get hold of these tactical nuclear weapons ultimately. That's certainly a fear in the West as well as here.
The other key point of difference seems to be the economy, with many of the republics rather angry with Russia because they're going to free their prices on Thursday. What in practical terms are they angry about?
Well, the point is that on Thursday, prices of many very basic foodstuffs and other goods here in Russia will go up 3 or up to 5 times. There'll be huge price rises. And the fear is that Russians, in desperation, will go to either Ukraine or Kazakhstan or other neighboring republics in search of much cheaper goods. And they will simply buy up many of the goods which are already in short supply in Ukraine and Kazakhstan. So those republics are really fearful that what are already scarce commodities will become even scarcer. They wanted Boris Yeltsin to coordinate price reform with them, to put it off for another few weeks. He said he's already put it off from December the 16th to January the 2nd. He simply couldn't wait any longer. He says that was Gorbachev's mistake to put things off, and he's not prepared to make that same mistake.
Ben Brown in Moscow, thanks. Here, a record number of companies went bankrupt this year, according to a survey from a leading business information group. More than 47,000 firms went out of business in 1991, an increase of 65% on the previous year. Worries over the state of the economy put pressure on the pound in the foreign exchange markets. Sterling fell to its lowest level since March within the exchange rate mechanism, before rallying slightly. The pound closed down 0.34 of a pfennig against the German mark at 2.8411.
For almost 1,000 businesses a week, 1991 was the end of the line. What's worse, the rate at which companies are going bust was still accelerating in the final weeks of the year. The findings of financial consultants Dun & Bradstreet are accompanied by a warning that few signs have yet emerged of the recession letting up in any part of the country.
What we're seeing with this recession, unlike the last one, where it was purely the small company, this time around it is also the medium to large size company that's being affected, either in terms of failure or making dramatic cutbacks.
5 regions, including Scotland, Wales and the West Country, saw business failures rise more than 70% last year. The South East, West Midlands and the North fared little better, with increases well above 50%. Only in London did the rate of increase stay just under 50%. The rising toll of company failure has contributed to a fall in business confidence reported today by the Institute of Directors. The Institute has blamed membership of the exchange rate mechanism for prolonging the recession by forcing the government to keep British interest rates high.
We ought to have interest rates at under 10% at the moment. All economic logic points to that. You only have to look at USA and Japan, who are down, of course, down to over 5 and under, to see how far out of line we are, given the depth of the recession out of which we're coming. It is the ERM stopping us moving.
In an interview with the Financial Times, the Chancellor, Norman Lamont, has repeated his determination to defend the value of the pound in the exchange rate mechanism, even if it means raising British interest rates again. He also concedes government forecasts of the speed of the recovery may have been too optimistic. Tonight, sterling is the weakest currency within the exchange rate mechanism, trading at the very limit of its permitted range of values. The government will do everything within its power to avoid raising interest rates ahead of the general election, but says it's prepared to accept the consequences rather than suffer the humiliation of devaluing the pound.
The Labour leader Neil Kinnock says government ministers have misled people about the state of the economy. He said if the Chancellor cut income tax before the election, Labour would reverse it to give more to health and education. The Environment Secretary, Michael Heseltine, tonight said Labour's policies were unworkable, a leap back into the past. Our political correspondent, Nicholas Jones, reports.
Labour enters the final lap in the run-up to the general election campaign with what it says are detailed plans for a sustained recovery, believing voters are ready to make the leap to accept a new government. The priority is to increase investment, improve essential services and bring forward public spending programmes. And from the Labour leader, a pledge tonight that a future Labour government would reverse any pre-election tax cuts.
If they did take a penny off the tax, we would put the penny back on. And we would put it back on because the National Health Service, the education system, the basic public services desperately need all the resources they can get and certainly can't afford to take the loss of £1.5 billion, especially when it would mean next to nothing for wage earners and salary earners and absolutely nothing at all in terms of stimulating and reviving the economy.
The government, uneasy at Labour's renewed confidence, wants to get off the defensive. In the next few months, Michael Heseltine will be one of the key ministers authorised to speak out beyond his cabinet brief, challenging Labour on the economy.
The world is having a difficult situation, and we're seeing here the British economy beginning to turn. We must continue that process. Low inflation is the background, the essential ingredient of growth. That's why the Labour Party's threat of a leap year is so dangerous. A leap back into the socialist ways, a leap in taxation, a leap in public expenditure, a leap in interest rates. We can't risk that.
But the Liberal Democrats fear the recession could get worse, claiming it's the government's fault.
We could actually have another severe dip of recession because the necessary measures were not taken in time. And we could certainly face the prospect of higher interest rates if the government doesn't take action to restore confidence in the pound and in the British economy.
Polling day might be 4, 5 or even 6 months away, but already the electioneering is getting back up to speed, with the dominant issue being the economy. And as it's going to have to face weeks of unrelenting pressure in the face of what could be unpredictable economic statistics and surveys, the government is determined to try to turn up the heat as it fights back on its economic record.
A car bomb in Beirut has killed 15 people and wounded well over 100 more. Most of those caught in the explosion were women and small children. It happened in the mainly Muslim western part of the city, near barracks and checkpoints manned by Syrian soldiers.
The rescue operation went on throughout the day as civil defense workers and security forces struggled to save survivors trapped in burning buildings and to dig the victims from the rubble. Experts believe the blast was caused by more than 200 pounds of explosives. It turned an everyday street scene in one of Beirut's most crowded Muslim quarters into a scene of instant devastation. All the buildings around the busy crossroads where the bomb went off were badly damaged. Their fronts were torn off by the blast, and many fires were started. The streets were left strewn with rubble and the wreckage of burnt-out cars and street traders' barrows. There were tense scenes as anguished survivors pressed forward in search of missing relatives. Security forces fired shots in the air to clear the way for casualties being rushed to local hospitals, which put out urgent appeals for blood donations. Many of the victims were women and children. There was no obvious specific target for the bombing, though it took place in an area sympathetic to the radical Hezbollah. The Prime Minister, Mr. Omar Karami, and many other politicians said the real target was the peace process, which has given the country more than a year of respite from such scenes of indiscriminate carnage. Many Lebanese are still far from confident in the peace, and the explosion will undoubtedly have shaken their confidence still further. Tim Muir, BBC, Beirut.
The Yugoslav government has called on all Yugoslavs to stop fighting and work for peace. The appeal came shortly before the UN Special Envoy, Cyrus Vance, was due to arrive in Belgrade on his 5th peace mission. But the fighting has continued, with air and artillery attacks throughout Croatia. A cameraman working in a suburb of Karlovac was killed. Zivko Krističević was a Croat working for the British news agency WTN. His death brings the total number of journalists killed in the conflict to 22.
When the conflict started, the town of Karlovac was a long way from it, but now it's on the very front line. And last night, this Croatian stronghold suffered its fiercest bombardment yet. That was the debris falling down, and this, another fine old town of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, disappearing into ruins as the 14th ceasefire collapses. Later in the day, a Yugoslav aircraft over Karlovac drew heavy Croatian ground fire. And the casualties? Many were Croats who'd come from outlying districts to what they thought was the safer ground of Karlovac. They were wrong. According to a doctor in the hospital here, 11 people have been killed in the town and 64 injured in the past 4 days. And that was before the fighting this afternoon. The cameraman who took these pictures from World Television News, Zivko Krističević, known and respected by us all, was hit as he ran and killed. One death among so many. The hoped-for midwinter lull has not occurred. Peacekeeping forces are not yet in place. Each side is trying to hold what it has and then grab what it can. Martin Bell, BBC News, Croatia.
President Bush has begun a personal campaign to sell America to the world with an 11-day tour of Australia and Asia. It's the first trip of its kind ever undertaken by a US president. Mr. Bush will be asking for trade restrictions against American goods to be dropped to help the ailing US economy. From Washington, Martin Sixsmith.
Growing criticism that George Bush has let the domestic economy slide into recession while he devotes his time to international diplomacy brought a firm rejoinder from the president that on this tour, American interests will take priority.
If we want to put people to work here at home, we've got to expand trade and to open markets. There are still too many countries where markets are closed to quality American goods and services. There are still too many countries whose consumers want but cannot buy American products.
Popular resentment of Japanese products flooding into America and causing a $40 billion trade deficit has forced Bush to replace international goodwill and security concerns with hard-headed economics.
The president, by putting the business side up front, is basically signaling that that our commercial interests are at the top of the U.S. agenda. That's appropriate in this post-war, Cold War period that we're in now.
With America's automakers facing massive job losses, Bush clearly views a mission to seek curbs on Japanese car exports as a potential vote winner in next year's presidential campaign. The president's newfound concern to present himself as batting for America has even led him to produce a TV commercial aimed at boosting the numbers of foreign tourists visiting the U.S.
Today, there are more reasons than ever to visit America. And there's never been a better time than now. So what are you waiting for? An invitation from the President?
With domestic policy the key to his re-election prospects, George Bush is doing everything possible to rescue the economy. And in foreign relations terms, that will almost certainly mean a tougher, less generous America than in recent years. Martin Sixsmith, BBC News, Washington.
Here, complaints and queries about the telephone service have increased by 1/4 this year, according to a report by the consumer watchdog Oftel. But British Telecom is now clearing almost all faults within 48 hours. The report also says that 10 million obscene calls are being made to women each year.
The size of phone bills is what has bothered people most. When VAT went up from 15 to 17.5%, BT imposed the increase straight away, which meant some customers were charged the higher rate for calls made before the rise. BT says everyone should have had refunds by now. Oftel says BT was slow to react to customers' problems. But when it comes to the quality of service rather than value for money, British Telecom fares better. It clears 99% of faults within 2 working days. 95% of BT public call boxes are working, and 84% of customers are very or fairly satisfied with the service provided by BT.
People expect a company in the private sector to respond really effectively and efficiently and be more customer responsive. They're waiting with some impatience to see more competition coming in, and that will be happening increasingly, and that will improve things as well.
Oftel found the other telephone company, Mercury, is clearing 95% of faults within 2 days, and 1 in 50 of their call boxes are out of action. Obscene phone calls to women appear to have declined, but there are still 10 million a year. Oftel welcomes the setting up of a national malicious call bureau to identify callers.
The RSPCA says many harmless family pets are being destroyed because a new law is too inflexible. The Dangerous Dogs Act, introduced after a series of horrific attacks, is being increasingly criticised by dog owners and animal welfare agencies because of the way it's being implemented, as Fergus Walsh reports.
This 3-year-old pit bull terrier is under sentence of death and has just 4 days to live. Stella was ordered to be destroyed by a court because her owner took off her muzzle in public so that she could drink from a puddle. In an attempt to gain clemency for Stella, the Morrison family from Bristol presented a petition at 10 Downing Street.
Well, we're all upset. It ruined our Christmas. She's not a vicious dog. She's very good for the children, grandchildren, well, all children, everyone.
The courts now have powers to order the destruction of any type of dog found to be dangerously out of control which injures someone. Laddie, a border collie from Bradford, was put down earlier this month after it bit a pools collector, causing minor injury. Its owner says killing the dog was too severe a penalty.
It's like losing a human person. Laddie were a friend of mine, and it was a lovable animal, and you could talk to it.
The RSPCA says there must be an alternative to the automatic destruction of dogs which bite. Otherwise, normally harmless pets will be killed.
People were so anxious to give the courts power that any really dangerous dog could be put away, so it's not going to attack again, and yet ignored the effect this legislation, as it's presently worded, is going to have really and even quite minor injuries caused by what normally are quite mild dogs.
The Home Office rejects suggestions that any part of the Dangerous Dogs Act is unfair, and there are no plans to amend the legislation. Ministers remain convinced that the new law will make the streets safer for everyone.
Tomorrow is the last day of an amnesty for farmers who've been storing out-of-date or banned pesticides. Farmers who fail to hand in dangerous chemicals and pay for their disposal can be fined. Some farmers are saying they shouldn't have to foot the bill.
Suppliers of agrochemicals throughout the country have acted as agents for the scheme. Staff travelled out to farms and checked what chemicals were being stored, then told the farmers how much they'd have to pay to dispose of them. Under the scheme, the farmers are paying less than normal commercial rates, although it can still be expensive.
They are still having to pay, but they're paying a rate which is much less than they would pay on the open market. I know of a case where one farmer was quoted £1,800 through the scheme, but he was quoted £4,300 outside the scheme, so it is a much better rate.
The 4-month amnesty has been welcomed by farmers.
we have bought the chemicals in good faith, and they have been approved chemicals, and for some reason they have not been used. Now, it may be that change in the weather prevented them from being used at that time, but they're left on stock. The farmer then has paid 3 times for the chemicals. He has bought the chemical. As I said, he hasn't used it. He has then had to replace it by another chemical, perhaps a safer one, I don't know. And then he's had to pay to dispose of it.
After tomorrow, any farmer found storing pesticides that are now banned could be fined up to £2,000.
The cost of private health care is to rise in some cases by more than a third. Companies like Buerk are blaming higher hospital charges and an increase in the number of claims, as John Fryer reports.
Having lost £63 million last year, Buerk, the market leader, is introducing big price rises, dragging its rivals in its wake. Buerk admits it badly miscalculated how many people would claim.
For every 18 people that we see claiming in 1991, only 15 would have claimed in 1989. That's a 20% increase. We'd forecast something more in the order of 14 to 15%.
Patients are increasingly being offered day care instead of expensive overnight stays in hospital. Many subscribers are opting for cheaper premiums, some with no claims bonuses. General insurers like Norwich Union are moving into private health care, which is fast becoming a cutthroat business. They admit price increases may frighten some customers off.
It's possible that the growth, consistent growth over recent years will be slowed down in the short term, but the market is more likely to grow healthily if insurers charge the correct amount for the risk they cover than if they charge too little.
Buerk lost 100,000 members last year, mainly from company schemes where the employer went bust, with the recession still taking its toll on businesses, coupled with the steep increase in premiums. Private medicine faces a double squeeze next year.
Animal welfare groups are calling for an end to the international trade in wild birds. They say millions die in transit after being taken from the wild to be sold in European pet shops. They say the European community should ban all imports of the birds. Lisa Hempeley reports.
A parrot tethered to the ground as a decoy. Baby parrots snatched from their nests. And others force-fed before being flown to Europe, the world's largest market in wild birds. Throughout the year, animal welfare groups have been collecting evidence of the brutality of the wild bird trade. In Senegal, the world's largest exporter, they found 12,000 birds packed into 6 cages for a 2-day journey to the capital. The trapper said he expected 50 out of every 150 to die on the way to market.
This man is an expert in what he does. He does it every week, and he was expecting 33% mortality in a 2-day part of a 6-week trail from capture to the pet shop. That's why we think it's got to end now.
In Tanzania, the investigators secretly filmed the chairman of animal exporters, who admitted permits were forged and protected species bought.
So all we really need to do is to give you a letter of credit. And
for those banned
species.
Yeah.
And you'll get
for this.
And you'll get.
Yeah, we'll get the permit.
The animal welfare groups estimate that for every bird that ends up in a pet shop, 3 others have died. Today's report says export controls are clearly not working, and the European community should make a New Year's resolution to ban the wild bird trade.
Now the main news again. The former Soviet republics have agreed a single command for nuclear weapons, but they failed to agree joint conventional forces. And there are still major differences over economic reforms. And Labour have warned that if the government cut taxes before the election, they will put them up again if they gain power. That's the news tonight. Good night.
From Newsroom Southeast, the main stories this evening. Police say they've been inundated with offers of help and support after a number of savage attacks on elderly women over the Christmas period. One of the victims, a 70-year-old, was attacked and raped on Christmas morning at her home at Crawley in Sussex. Her attacker is described as a white youth in his 20s. He was armed with a knife. Today, his victim spoke of her ordeal to help save others from the same fate.
I've said a lot of don't do that and quite things like that. Then he asked, where's your money then? I think he's absolutely disgusting, and I do hope that he'll be captured, because I hate it happened to anybody else.
Doctors say they're concerned about the health of hundreds of homeless people who returned to the streets today after spending Christmas in an emergency shelter. The centre, run by the charity Crisis, provides hot meals and beds for London's homeless. A team of 12 volunteer doctors examined more than 400 people over the 8-day period and are concerned that many of them aren't fit for life on the streets.
There's quite a number of people who shouldn't go back on the streets because their medical conditions are going to deteriorate once they get back out there.
Police believe arsonists were responsible for a fire at a furniture warehouse in North London. The contents of the Allied Maples building in Edmonton were completely destroyed. Police say that crude incendiary devices were probably used after bottles and rags were found at the scene. Forensic experts have been searching for the wreckage for more evidence. Tottenham Hotspur has announced that dealing in its shares will recommence tomorrow. They were suspended in October, shortly after manager Terry Venables and businessman Alan Sugar took over the debt-laden club. A new issue will also begin in the morning as part of a refinancing plan. That's all from Newsroom South East. We're back tomorrow morning. Now the weather with Bernard Davey.
Good evening. The weather's on the change now. We're losing the high pressure. It's going to slip away southwards and eastwards. That's going to open up the floodgates, allow these weather fronts to come in from the west, bring in the rain, strong to gale force winds, and New Year's Day looks like being a rather unsettled one, especially in the north. So let's see how things are going to work out over the next 24 hours. The high pressure slipping away. Here we see the first band of rain, perhaps heavy at times at first as it crosses Scotland, Northern Ireland, but then further south it'll become lighter and patchier. A bit of a hiccup here before it tries to clear away from the south. At the same time, we'll find the next lot of rain into northern Scotland. Just look at the isobars, increasing as we go north, so expect some strong to gale force winds, and they're already on the increase, especially in the west, quite gusty. Later the night, perhaps up to gale force. During tomorrow, they ease down for a while before they increase once again, only this time they're likely to be severe gales, western and northern Scotland. Now today we've seen some good sunshine again over the Channel Islands, some breaks in the southwest, some breaks northeastern Scotland, but this is the band of cloud, the cold front, that will bring the next belt of rain, but perhaps not getting into the Outer Hebrides until late in the night. One or two breaks running through Northern Ireland into southern Scotland, but a good deal of cloud across the country, at times thick enough to give the odd spot of drizzle. The temperatures around 4 to 6 underneath that blanket of cloud. Then tomorrow the rain crossing Scotland, Northern Ireland, down into northern England, Wales and the southwest. Ahead of it, perhaps some brighter interludes, but also likely to be some spots of rain. Showers, blustery at times, getting into the northwest, and then the brighter weather following down behind the rain as it moves into the Midlands, East Anglia and other southern counties of England, and then the next lot of rain ready to come in from the west. Temperatures tomorrow ranging from about 7 in East Anglia to 10 in the west, that's 50, very windy in the north with gales at times. And then on New Year's Day, rain crossing Scotland down into northern England, then returning again across Northern Ireland into western Scotland. Some drizzle around these western coasts, central and eastern areas mild with some brightness. That's it from me. Good night to you.
Get the best in New Year entertainment with the Radio Times. Back on the Tyneside beat, Jimmy Nail returns as that maverick detective, Spender, while extending the long leg of the law, Hugh Laurie, aided and abetted by Stephen Fry. The multi-talented Adam Faith talks about his return to the small screen in the new BBC One series Love Hurts. And look who else is back.
I'm free, and I'm in the Radio Times, where you can find out what me and the rest of the Grace Brothers lot have been up to all this time.
Throughout 1991, the all-channel Radio Times has become so easy to use and so packed with feature information that it's now essential reading. The Radio Times, Magazine of the Year.
Oliver Stone's award-winning film of the Vietnam War, Platoon, can be seen in its uncut version on BBC Two at 10 o'clock. This powerful and graphic portrait of men in battle inevitably contains episodes of violence and unrestrained language. Here on One, in 50 minutes, Jonathan Dimbleby reviews the main events of the past year, from the Gulf War to the Maastricht Summit. First comedy, and down on the allotments, something organic is stirring, and it spells trouble for Victor with his 1 foot in the grave.